So, friends, can you imagine government officials, political appointees, telling a U.S. attorney, telling a top prosecutor, look, we don't care if there's no evidence that Letitia James committed any crime. We want you to criminally indict her anyway. Of course, you can imagine that in the age of Trump. Let's talk about that because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, are you ready for the pinnacle of prosecutorial abuse? Trump and some of his officials are reportedly pressuring a U.S. attorney to indict New York Attorney General Letitia James, even though there is insufficient evidence that she committed any crime. The sliver of light, we're always looking for the points of light. Here's a point of light, dim though it may be. That U.S. attorney is resisting. Let's start with the new reporting. Headline, Trump officials pressuring federal prosecutors to bring criminal charges against New York Attorney General Letitia James. And that article begins, top Trump administration officials are pressuring federal prosecutors in Virginia to bring charges against New York Attorney General Letitia James for mortgage fraud, despite investigators so far failing to find sufficient evidence to support such charges, according to sources familiar with the investigation. After a 5-month investigation and interviews with more than a dozen witnesses, federal prosecutors have so far uncovered no clear evidence that James knowingly made false statements to a financial institution to secure favorable terms on a mortgage for her Virginia home, according to multiple sources briefed on the investigation. Trump himself has pressured the Department of Justice leadership to investigate James more aggressively, and 2 officials, Ed Martin, the head of DOJ's Weaponization Working Group, and Bill Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, have pushed the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia to seek an indictment of James. When federal prosecutors recently declined to indict James, Pulte encouraged Trump to fire Eric Siebert, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and replace him with a prosecutor who would be willing to bring charges against James, sources said. James has denied wrongdoing, and her lawyer, Abby Lowell, has criticized the criminal referral as 3 pages of stale, threadbare allegations that he called the next salvo in President Trump's revenge tour against Attorney General James. And this quote from James' attorney, quote, given the cascade of unsubstantiated allegations coming from the Trump administration on its mortgage fraud crusade against Democrats, it's no surprise they're having trouble finding an objective and law-abiding prosecutor who would ignore the facts and the evidence to manufacture sham charges. So friends, let's hope that U.S. Attorney Eric Siebert continues to hold the line, continues to refuse to bring baseless, vindictive criminal charges against Letitia James. Friends, there's something else worth considering. If Trump fires U.S. Attorney Siebert for refusing to bring bogus charges against James and Trump appoints some flunky who will, you know how that very likely would play out in court? Letitia James' lawyer would file a motion to dismiss based on vindictive prosecution, and given the record that has been developed, even just in the public reporting, even before you get to discovery, that motion would very likely be successful. And the case would be dismissed, probably with prejudice, meaning it could never be rebrought, as a way to punish the wrongdoing, the lawlessness of the Trump administration and Trump's Department of Justice. And you know what would happen? That would expose Donald Trump's threats to prosecute his enemies as being hollow. They would lose their force. They would lose their ability to intimidate. And indeed, Donald Trump's power itself would be diminished if a federal judge, basically crammed down the throats of the DOJ lawyers who are unethical enough to bring baseless charges that are not supported by the evidence against Letitia James. Federal judges would figuratively cram that case right down the throats of those DOJ attorneys. And that really would expose Trump's lawlessness and diminish Trump's power, his ability to instill fear by saying, I'm going to prosecute all of my foes. Now, friends, let me be clear. I don't want to see Letitia James vindictively prosecuted, but I sure would like to see the federal courts diffuse Donald Trump's repeated efforts to use DOJ as a weapon rather than as an instrument of justice. And I sure would like to see Trump's threats to prosecute his enemies exposed for the hollow, deeply disturbing, but ultimately hollow threats they really are. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.